What if the real secret to building a billion-dollar company wasn't about strategy or funding, but about a psychological journey? Well, today, we're embarking on what we're calling the Founder's Odyssey to uncover the unspoken truths behind some truly incredible success stories. It all really starts with this idea from Airbnb's Brian Chesky. We spend so much time obsessing over changing our circumstances, right? Our jobs, our homes, our bank accounts. But what if the most powerful force is the one thing we can't easily change? Our internal world. That's the core question we're going to dig into. So let's kick things off with Chapter 1, The Spark. It turns out the rocket fuel for world-changing ambition, well, it isn't usually found in privilege or some kind of perfect upbringing. Nope, it's found in the cracks of a difficult beginning. Just think about that feeling for a second, being on the outside looking in. For a lot of us, it's a phase, something uncomfortable we grow out of. But for founders like Brian Chesky, that feeling of being different, it wasn't a phase at all. It actually became the central organizing principle of their entire identity. So where does that deep, profound sense of being an outsider come from? Well, the pattern is kind of startlingly consistent. It often traces back to one single, really powerful source: a difficult relationship with a parent. And listen, this isn't just some footnote in their story, it's the engine. I mean, look at the pattern right here. For Barbara Corcoran, her father's chaos created this desperate need for control. For Sophia Amoruso, all that external criticism became a relentless internal critic. And for Alex Hormozy, he was basically running a race to win a game he didn't even choose. See, each story is different, but the psychological result is exactly the same. A deep, primal wound that ends up fueling this unstoppable drive to build a world they can control. And right here, this is where we find the first great secret of the Founder's Odyssey. Your greatest wound often becomes your greatest weapon. That pain gets transformed into pure rocket fuel. But what happens when that rocket fuel of ambition smacks right into the harsh gravity of reality? Well, that brings us to Chapter 2, The Crucible. This is where that initial spark gets seriously tested by fire. Okay, picture this. You've built a company that's bigger than Starbucks. You're on top of the world. And then, in just 8 weeks, 80% of it completely vanishes. That's exactly what happened to Airbnb during the pandemic. It's like an 18-wheeler hitting a brick wall at full speed. And this wasn't just about losing revenue. This was an existential threat. So when Chesky calls it his darkest hour, he's talking about a moment where the entire story could have just ended. The dream could have died. Right there. But here's the critical pivot. This is so important. While most people would see a giant stop sign, the greatest founders, they see a map. They reframe catastrophic failure, not as an ending, but as the most valuable piece of data they could ever possibly receive. Sophia Amoruso puts it perfectly, doesn't she? Success is a terrible teacher. It just tells you you're right. It's only when things go tragically wrong that you're forced to actually get smart. Failure isn't a dead end, it's a compass, and it's pointing you in a brand new direction. So once you've been forged in that fire, the mission, it changes. You move from just surviving to building something significant. And this brings us to Chapter 3, The Ascent, which is all about building a real legacy. And the secret to legacy? It isn't your products, it's your people. It's all about your culture. Brian Chesky's analogy here is just brilliant. Culture isn't some rule book, it's an internalized instinct. Like a perfect golf swing that just happens automatically. It's what your team does when absolutely no one is watching. And building that culture, it means hiring a very specific kind of person. I mean, just look at the keywords here. Urgency, ambition over passion, obsession. A really clear picture starts to emerge. They're not hiring for resumes. They're hiring for hunger. They're looking for people who have something to prove, because those are the people who build legacies. It all boils down to this fundamental truth from Cody Sanchez. Before you have a product, before you have a single dollar of profit, you have people. Your company will only ever be as strong as the team you build. Period. But what happens when you do it all, right? You build the team, you create the culture, you win the game, you finally reach the summit, only to find out it's empty. And this is the great paradox we find in Chapter 4. This feeling is surprisingly common. Spotify's Daniel Ek gets everything he ever thought he wanted by the time he's 22, and his reaction is this hollowing thing. Why? Because the external rewards, the money, the status, they were never really the point. They were just a way to soothe that internal wound of feeling like an outsider. But when you get them, the original wound is still there. Brian Chesky's insight here is so crucial. If $1 billion can't fill the void, then $10 billion won't either. It's a classic case of what psychologists call hedonic adaptation. Basically, the thrill wears off, the novelty fades, and you're just left right back where you started, with yourself. You can't fix an internal problem with an external solution. It just doesn't work. And that realization, that marks the final, most crucial stage of the Odyssey, the return. After conquering the entire external world, the real quest begins, the journey home, to oneself. This is where the real prize is found. And this right here is the ultimate choice every founder eventually has to face. On the left, you've got a life of achievement, all about chasing those external scorecards. On the right, a life of meaning, which is about following an internal compass. The journey's final lesson is that winning the game is totally empty if you lose yourself in the process. So how do you make that shift? Well, marketing powerhouse Bozoma St. John says the answer isn't out there in some book or podcast. The answer is in here. It's about tuning out all the world's noise so you can finally hear the signal of your own intuition. And this whole thing really comes down to one simple, incredibly powerful test, which is beautifully put by serial entrepreneur Marcia Kilgore. It just cuts through all the noise, all the pressure, all the external expectations. It forces us to zoom out from the immediate pressures, the funding rounds, the growth targets, and to ask the ultimate question. The Founder's Odyssey teaches us that the goal isn't just to build a successful company, but to build a life you won't regret living. So, on your deathbed, what will your answer be?